In a small, peaceful town where rules were everything, the HOA patrol thought they could bend the law to their will. But when they tried to push too far, they picked the wrong man to mess with. Sheriff Cole Jensen wasn't just a lawman, he was the law. What started as a simple confrontation turned into a battle for respect, power, and justice. And when the truth came to light, the HOA's reign of terror would come crashing down. At first glance, Willow Ridge looked like the kind of neighborhood where trouble came to retire. Manicured lawns stretched in perfect symmetry. Mailboxes gleamed under the morning sun. Porch flags fluttered like obedient soldiers in the breeze. But beneath the surface of its pristine tranquility, the place was ruled with an iron fist by the HOA. The Homeowners Association wasn't just a board here. It was a regime. Every bush had to be trimmed to a regulation height. Trash cans were color-coded, and God help the soul who left theirs out past 10 a.m. But worst of all were the patrols, a team of volunteers turned vigilantes, cruising golf carts up and down the streets like wannabe cops, clipboards in hand, eyes sharp with petty authority. Sheriff Cole Jensen lived right in the heart of it. To most folks in town, he was just a quiet man with a commanding presence, a broad-shouldered, steely-eyed figure who'd served 2 decades in law enforcement. But Cole wasn't the type to flaunt his badge. He believed in restraint, even when it wasn't returned. He'd moved to Willow Ridge after a hard divorce and a harder final case that ended with 3 funerals and a near miss for a 4th. His. He thought he'd found peace in the neighborhood's predictability. That was before the HOA's patrol started acting more like a militia than a neighborhood watch. "They fined me for a wind chime, Cole," his neighbor Sharon had whispered once, eyes darting nervously. "Said it violated noise decorum." Cole had laughed, but inside something had shifted. He'd seen that look before, fear disguised as compliance. Now they'd begun enforcing unwritten codes about appearance, behavior, even who you spoke to on your own lawn. And the worst of them all? Glenn Mercer, head of the HOA patrol, former security guard, full-time menace. Cole kept his head down, followed the rules when it made sense, ignored the ones that didn't. He figured it was better not to stir the hornet's nest, but even hornets make a mistake when they bite the wrong hand, and the patrol? They were about to make the biggest mistake of all, one that would leave the whole town watching and wondering who exactly they thought they were trying to control. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. The HOA patrol team called themselves the Neighborhood Compliance Unit, a title they printed on matching polo shirts like it gave them actual authority. Their golf carts had yellow caution lights bolted to the roofs, and they carried radios clipped to their belts as if they were on active duty in a war zone instead of a suburban cul-de-sac. But to people like Glenn Mercer, that illusion of power was more than enough. Glenn stood at 5'8" with a permanent scowl and mirrored aviators he wore rain or shine. After getting dismissed from his job as a mall security guard for excessive conduct, he found his second calling as the self-declared captain of Willow Ridge's patrol. And the problem wasn't just Glenn. It was the way his influence infected others. People like Darlene Kipps. Darlene, a retired librarian with a clipboard fetish, followed Glenn around like a loyal deputy. She wrote citations like "they were love" letters, grass too long, hedge too bushy, paint shade 2 tones off from the approved palette. And lately she'd grown bolder. Residents caught her photographing their backyards from ladders. She claimed it was for documentation. It started with minor violations, petty fines. Then came the public shaming. They would post photos on the neighborhood's app, blurring faces but not addresses. "Non-compliant trash bin placement," one caption read. "Unauthorized garden ornamentation," said another. It wasn't about keeping the neighborhood orderly anymore. It was about control, a performance of power. Cole watched it all unfold from a distance. He saw the hushed complaints, the way neighbors averted their eyes when the patrol carts came rumbling past. He heard about the teenage boy questioned for skateboarding too loudly, the elderly woman fined for feeding birds. The patrol wasn't maintaining order. They were cultivating fear. "You can either be a good neighbor," Glenn once said smugly at a town meeting, "or you can be a problem." Cole had stared at him that night. Just stared. Not because he was intimidated, but because he was measuring the man, trying to decide what kind of storm it would take to knock over someone so puffed up on self-importance. He thought it might all burn itself out eventually, but power unchecked doesn't burn out, it escalates. And Glenn was just waiting for a spark. It came one cool Saturday morning when Cole, off-duty and calm, strapped on his sidearm for a walk and stepped into their crosshairs. And that's when everything started unraveling. The morning started like any other, quiet, crisp, and undisturbed. Mist clung low over the sidewalks of Willow Ridge, and the air still carried the earthy scent of last night's rain. Sheriff Cole Jensen stepped out of his home in jeans and a gray flannel shirt, the hem untucked. His leather sidearm holster sat comfortably on his right hip, worn in from years of use. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't need to be. In this state, open carry was perfectly legal, and Cole knew the law better than anyone. He nodded to a jogger as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The man gave him a polite smile, eyes flicking to the Glock before quickly looking away. Cole was used to it. In his mind, this was routine, normal. A peaceful walk to clear his head, like he'd done every Saturday since moving here. But as he rounded the bend near Elm Grove, he heard the telltale beep-beep of a golf cart speeding up. He didn't need to turn around. He already knew who it was. "Hey!" a sharp voice barked from behind. "You! Stop right there!" Cole sighed, paused, and slowly turned. Glenn Mercer was barreling toward him in the HOA patrol cart, a clipboard clutched in one hand like a warrant. His aviators reflected the early light, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed something else. Fear? Anger? Maybe both. "You think this is funny?" Glenn snapped as he leapt off the cart. "You think you can walk around this neighborhood armed? Like some wannabe cowboy?" Cole kept his tone even. "It's called open carry. Perfectly legal. I'm well within my rights." "Not here, you're not. HOA policy strictly prohibits weapons in public spaces." Cole raised an eyebrow. "HOA policy doesn't override state law." "You don't get to argue the law with me, pal." "Pal." That was new. Glenn's hand drifted toward his radio. "I'm calling this in. You're in violation. You're threatening public safety. You're going to be detained." "Detained?" Cole repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. "On what grounds?" "You're armed and aggressive." Cole's eyes narrowed. "I haven't moved an inch since you pulled up." That's when Darlene Kipps rolled in from the side path, her own cart screeching to a halt like a second patrol unit. She pulled out her phone, started recording. "Got him," she whispered. "Just keep him talking." Cole's stomach turned, not from fear, but from disgust. This wasn't about safety. This was performance. Theater. Glenn stepped forward. "Place the weapon on the ground and put your hands where I can see them." Cole stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You sure you want to do this? You threatening me now?" "No," Cole said. "But you're about to make the dumbest mistake of your life." And just like that, Glenn reached for Cole's arm. That's when things went from ridiculous to dangerous. Glenn's grip clamped down on Cole's forearm with more force than necessary. The clipboard now discarded on the sidewalk like a broken badge. Cole didn't move, not yet. His instincts flared, not from fear, but from the unmistakable shift in the air. This wasn't just an argument anymore. Glenn had crossed the line. I said, "Disarm yourself," Glenn growled, trying to yank Cole's arm back like he was restraining a criminal. Cole's voice dropped to a low, commanding rumble. "Let go of me, Glenn. That's an order." But Glenn didn't budge. Darlene was still filming, narrating like a field reporter. "We have an armed man refusing to comply with HOA directives. Possibly unstable, possibly dangerous." Cole's pulse quickened, not from panic, but from the weight of the moment. His badge was in his wallet. His ID was on him. But he knew showing it now wouldn't de-escalate things. It would enrage them. This wasn't about identity anymore. It was about ego and control. "I'm not resisting," Cole said calmly. "You're making a false accusation, and you're about to create a very big legal problem for yourself." Darlene spoke into her radio. "This is Unit 2. Backup requested. We've got a non-compliant armed subject. Initiating citizen's arrest." Cole's jaw tensed. Citizen's arrest? They weren't just bluffing. They were doubling down. Down the street, blinds fluttered. Doors opened. Neighbors stepped onto porches, drawn by the commotion. Whispers floated in the air like smoke. "Is that the sheriff? Why's Glenn grabbing him? What's going on?" Cole took a slow breath, grounding himself. He'd stared down hostage-takers, gang leaders, cartel muscle. And now he was being manhandled by a man who once got fired for tackling a teenager shoplifting sunglasses. "Glenn," Cole said, eyes locked in, tone sharp, "if you don't take your hands off me right now, you're going to be the one facing charges. Assault, false detainment, abuse of authority." "I don't answer to you," Glenn snapped. "Actually," Cole said, yanking his arm free with practiced ease, "you do. And you just put your hands on the county sheriff." There was a split second of silence, like the air had been vacuumed out of the world. Glenn blinked. "You're lying." Cole reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open. The badge gleamed. Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Darlene's phone trembled in her hand. Her smug expression cracked like glass. "I didn't know," Glenn stammered, but Cole cut him off. "You didn't care to know." He holstered his weapon and took a step forward. "You've been playing cop in a neighborhood that didn't ask for one, and now you just tried to arrest the man who is the cop." Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time. Cole didn't flinch, but Glenn did, because now the cavalry was coming, and they weren't coming for the sheriff. Darlene's radio crackled with static, followed by a firm voice on the other end. "Unit 2, confirm your location. Patrol car en route," she pressed, the button with shaking fingers. "We're on Willow and Elm. Subject is armed, non-compliant. Attempted citizen's arrest is in progress." There was a pause, just long enough to stir unease. Then the dispatcher's voice returned, sharp and bewildered. "Repeat that. Who exactly are you detaining?" Glenn grabbed the radio from her, his voice tight with false authority. "Tall. Male, mid-40s, armed, claims he's law enforcement, but has no visible credentials. Says we're in violation." A second pause. Then came the voice that shattered everything. "That's Sheriff Cole Jensen. Stand down immediately." Glenn froze. Color drained from his face so quickly it was like someone had yanked the blood out with a vacuum hose. Darlene looked at Cole, then her phone screen, and slowly began lowering it, fingers trembling like she was holding a live grenade. "You're the sheriff?" she croaked. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The badge in his hand said, "Enough," and the way the crowd had gone deathly silent made it loud all on its own. I didn't know," Glenn muttered, stumbling back a step. "You were dressed casual, no uniform." Cole's gaze was razor-sharp. "I don't need to wear a costume to do my job." The golf cart's engine still hummed, a weak and nervous sound. A couple neighbors inched closer, eyes wide, phones discreetly raised. The power Glenn once wielded evaporated in the open air, replaced by confusion, shame, and fear. "Sheriff, Glenn tried, but Cole held up a hand. Save it. You made assumptions. You acted on ego. You laid hands on a man exercising his lawful rights without even verifying who he was. That's more than reckless. It's dangerous. From the distance, flashing blue and red lights cut through the mist. A county patrol SUV slid around the corner, tires crunching softly against the curb. The deputy behind the wheel stepped out, sunglasses low on his nose, jaw already clenched. "You okay, boss?" he called out. Cole gave a slight nod. Glenn looked like he wanted to disappear into the earth. "Are we being arrested?" Cole stared at them both, eyes unreadable. "That depends," he said coldly, "on whether this was just stupidity or something worse." And with that, he turned away, leaving the patrol, the crowd, and the silence behind him. But the real storm was just beginning. 3 days later, the town hall was packed tighter than a courtroom on sentencing day. Folding chairs lined the community center's multi-purpose room, rows upon rows filled with residents who, until now, had tolerated the HOA patrol's growing authority and silent frustration. But today, silence had been broken. Sheriff Cole Jensen stood at the front, not in flannel this time, but in full uniform, badge gleaming, sidearm holstered, and presence undeniable. Behind him, 2 deputies flanked a projection screen that displayed body cam footage from the responding unit. On it, Glenn's voice echoed with the damning authority of someone who had no right to give orders. Cole let the room sit in that discomfort for a long second before speaking. "I want to be very clear," he said, voice calm but cutting. "What happened last week wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a breach of basic law, civil rights, and public trust." Glenn and Darlene sat near the front, noticeably smaller in their seats, stripped of their matching vests and power-laced postures. Darlene looked like she hadn't slept in days. Glenn looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "I'm not here to press charges," Cole continued, scanning the crowd, "though I'd be well within my rights to do so. I'm here because this community deserves better than fear wrapped in faux authority." Murmurs stirred in the back. Then came a voice, loud, from an older woman in a red cardigan. "About time," she said. "They threatened to fine my grandson for having a skateboard on the sidewalk. Said it was reckless endangerment. He's 6. Someone else stood up. "They knocked on my door last month to ask why my grass was an inch too high. At 7 a.m. They said they'd document it." Then another. "They followed me with a clipboard when I was walking my dog. Said they were logging leash violations." Cole let the voices rise, not to stoke chaos, but to let the weight of suppressed frustration finally breathe. When the room quieted, he stepped forward. "This ends now. The HOA is a management body, not law enforcement. From this day on, no more patrols, no more badges. If there's a safety concern, you call the real professionals." He turned slightly toward Glenn and Darlene. "And to those who abused this system, you're not criminals, but you will be held accountable. Apologies aren't enough, but they're a start." Darlene looked up, tearful. Glenn gave a stiff nod, throat tight. As the meeting adjourned, Cole's mind replayed the incident. He didn't need vengeance. What he wanted, what the people needed, was order restored. But he couldn't shake one thought. What if he hadn't been the sheriff? How many others had they bullied into silence? Cole was reviewing security footage from his own driveway when a knock came at his office door. Deputy Mendez entered, face pale and tight-lipped, holding a thin manila envelope. "You're gonna want to see this," she said, sliding it onto his desk. Inside was a file filled with copies of emails, housing documents, and a transcript from a phone call recorded by a disgruntled HOA board secretary who'd had enough of the games. As Cole flipped through the papers, the pieces began falling into place like a rigged puzzle finally laid bare. At the center of it all was Glenn. Not just overzealous, not just power-hungry. He had an agenda. A few weeks prior to the confrontation, Glenn had submitted a formal inquiry to the HOA board, discreetly, of course, regarding the value and purchase potential of Sheriff Cole Jensen's property. The home sat on a corner lot with direct access to a wooded trail, land that Glenn had been eyeing for a private development deal with a local investor. The investor wanted the land cheap. Glenn wanted the commission. The harassment. The citizens' arrest? It hadn't been random. It had been part of a strategy. Push Cole. Provoke him. Make him out to be a threat. Unstable. Dangerous. Unfit to live in a civilized community. If they could get him fined, cited, or better, arrested, they could force a sellout under duress. Cole leaned back in his chair, fury swirling beneath the calm exterior. He tried to weaponize public trust to run me out of my own home, he muttered. Mendez nodded. We've got enough to present to the county board. Real estate fraud, conflict of interest, abuse of power. Darlene's involvement looks like cover. She may not have even known the full picture. Cole's fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk. Let's do it right, he said finally. Quiet, thorough, no circus. But as he stared out the window, one truth settled heavy in his gut. This wasn't just about land. This was about how far some people would go when they thought no one was watching, and he wasn't about to let them get away with it. The morning after the meeting, Cole stood before the county board, calm but unyielding. The room was filled with murmurs, some sympathetic, others skeptical. The members sat behind polished wood tables, their faces a mix of uncertainty and regret. He wasn't there for drama. He wasn't there to seek revenge. But he was there to make sure this never happened again. I'm not pressing charges, Cole began, his voice steady, though his eyes cut through the room like a blade. But I expect accountability. This community deserves more than just apologies. It deserves change. The chairman, a man Cole had known for years, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. You're telling us to dismantle an entire system. The HOA patrol has been effective in some ways. Effective? Cole's voice dropped low, but there was no mistaking the fire behind it. They intimidated residents, they overstepped their boundaries, and they abused their positions for personal gain. That's not effective. That's abuse of power. Few board members exchanged looks, but they knew better than to argue. The evidence Cole had provided was irrefutable. The secret dealings, the manipulation. They were cornered. I demand, Cole continued, his gaze never wavering, that the HOA's patrol powers be stripped immediately. The board will be restructured and new leadership will be put in place to restore transparency and fairness. This town has had enough of fear masquerading as order. The chairman cleared his throat, glancing at his colleagues. After a tense silence, he nodded. We'll review the bylaws. It's time for change, Sheriff. But you're sure? No legal action? No legal action, Cole confirmed, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. But know this. If anyone here tries to let this slide, under the rug, I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so forgiving. The room was silent as Cole stood and turned to leave, his footsteps echoing against the cold tile. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds. Slowly, the town was healing. Peace wouldn't come all at once, but with respect, with time, and with the strength of one man's resolve, it was already on its way. And the quiet town of Willow Creek would never be the same again. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.